when you're alone, you don't have the time to meet people with that facade that we normally have over us. When you meet people in your hometown, or it's such a condensed relationship that you have when you meet people traveling, that it becomes so instant and so much more intense.
Welcome to the Venture-Ette podcast, where women from all over the world share their stories of travel, moving abroad, and creating a new life for themselves, hoping to inspire you to live out your dreams by showing you how other women did it. I'm your host, Venture-Ette, Ashley. Hello, welcome to Venture-Ette podcast. I'm Ashley, and today I am so excited for today's guest. Normally we have guests on the show who have moved abroad to other countries, but today's guest goes to show that you don't have to move to another part of the world in order to completely change your life and grow as a person. It's really all about taking risks and doing things that you wouldn't normally do. And when you do things out of your comfort zone, that's when it really allows you to see more of who you are as a person and what you're capable of. And that's exactly what our guest Gabrielle did when she went on her first ever solo trip back in 2017. Now, she's not just a solo traveler, she is also a beautiful and well-accomplished director, actor, and author of the book, Eat, Pray, FML. And I'm so excited to have her on the show today to share with us as to what led her to go on this solo trip, which I'm going to tell you right now, it is quite a doozy. But she is a strong and beautiful woman, and I'm excited for her to share with us her story as to how solo travel has been for her and just how it really was traveling solo as a female. So I'm so pleased to welcome our guest, Gabrielle.
Hi, what an intro. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much for having me. Honestly, I read your book, and honestly, just reading, your words, you just sound like so humble and so, like you even say it, you're very spiritual. And I just felt really connected with you just from your words of reading your book. So honestly, just getting to talk with you right now is a huge honor for me, just because I felt like I could relate with you in so many ways. So I'm just really excited to, chat with you.
I'm so happy to hear that. I'm glad you enjoyed it and that you connected with it. It was a crazy time in my life. So whenever I get a chance to talk to women that have read it and resonate with it, it's a really big honor for me and makes it all worth it.
You talk about, not just travel, but you talk so much about your personal life as well and relationships that you've had. And I feel like for many women, we can all relate because we've had, probably similar experiences with men or experiences that we've had based on things from our childhood. I think that's why so many women can just relate to it. But I do want to kind of start a little bit as to kind of why the solo travel happened. And I just kind of want to talk a little bit about what happened before, because I felt like all these events that happened really led to just kind of giving you that push in order to do this trip that changed your life.
Yeah, totally. So I always say when people ask me why I decided to write a book, I kind of say that it happened to me, and that's very much true. In 2017, I had been married for almost 2 years, and I found out my husband was having an affair with a 19-year-old for 6 months, filed for divorce, left. Shortly after that, I met a guy and we fell madly in love with each other and had a whirlwind romance. He convinced me to go on a month-long trip to Italy. And 48 hours before we were getting on a plane, he told me he needed to go by himself. And I was absolutely devastated, but I had a decision to make, and that was either stay at home heartbroken or go travel Europe for a month by myself. So I chose to go, and I took nothing but a backpack and did 6 countries over the span of a month and wrote a book about it.
No, which I mean, I love that you decided to not just, take that trip for yourself, but you decided to like make something out of it, like something physically, out of it, which is a book. But I do want to talk a little bit about, there was a part in the book that I thought was just kind of, in a way, kind of foreshadowing a little bit about what you were going to accomplish for yourself and your solo trip. Because once you had filed for a divorce from your husband, you said Thank you for the ability to choose myself, to know that I am enough and that you don't deserve me. Thank you for showing me how strong I am, because I will come out the other end of this so much stronger than before. And you wrote this before you did, your trip, which really did change you. And so, how do you reflect on these words, knowing how things were before your solo trip and then compared to what you gained after your trip?
That's actually really cool to hear that and then have it pointed out that obviously I wrote that before my whole life changed and I did really come out so much stronger. So that was really cool to hear. Thank you. Um, I'm a walking example of everything happens for a reason. So I knew when Javier, the man who broke up with me before the trip, I knew when he told me he had to go by himself that this was the universe's clear way of giving me something to go face head on. Since I was a little girl, I've had abandonment issues since I lost my father. And I think those have run with me my whole life. And I've never really been safe or felt okay being alone. And this was the world's clear way of being like, well, it's time to go deal with this. And it really was that. It was this incredible opportunity to go change my life around. And that's exactly what it did. And I think that writing about all of it to be able to share it with people is a way that I could give back for having that wonderful experience offered to me.
You did it like just so, beautifully, like, well, like I really like enjoyed reading your story because like you said, it really, you know, I felt like what you were saying were giving me so much strength, and based on everything that I had gone through as well. But because like you said, Javier had decided to not go with you 48 hours before, and you were just given this kind of ultimatum of like whether you go or not. You had never done solo travel before. You had never done anything like this, and it never really crossed your mind before to do anything like this.
No, yeah. I mean, I had traveled a lot for work and with friends and family. Obviously, I had flown by myself before, but it would always be if I was traveling to a film set where I would then meet a bunch of people that kind of became my friends and family for the next however long I was there. I would never in a million years be like, oh, I'm just gonna decide to put a backpack on and go across the world and be by myself. That was never in my realm of possibility. And I think if he would have canceled on me with more time available, it might have ended up differently. I might have been like, well, let me try and find a friend that can come with me. But because it was so last minute, it was just like, okay, I guess I'm going. And it really totally changed my life. Now I love solo travel. I just did my second big solo trip, this one by choice. And it's completely amazing. You learn so much about yourself, you meet people in such an authentic way, and it's a really life-changing experience, and I urge anybody that's thinking about it or listening to do it at least once in your life. It's terrifying until you're on the actual plane, and then the immense amount of freedom that you feel and how capable you realize you are, it's really incredible.
No, it truly is. And then also too, like, as you solo travel, like you said, you meet so many other people. And, for myself as well, I can relate to what you were kind of going through in the book, is that you were meeting people that you were able to connect with so deeply, and you were able to connect with them so instantly. And I feel like that kind of gives you a sense of kind of comfort, like, wow, even though I'm on my own, like I'm still okay because I have genuine people that actually do really care about me, even though we probably met in the last like 24 hours.
Yeah, and it's true because when you're alone, you don't have the time to meet people with that facade that we normally have over us. When you meet people in your hometown, or it's such a condensed relationship that you have when you meet people traveling that it becomes so instant and so much more intense than it normally would in your day to day life. But you also meet people that just want to connect, and it's such a different vibe than when you're at home, and when you meet people it's like, oh well, what can this person offer in my life, and how it's especially in LA. But so when you meet people traveling, it's a really special bond that you're able to create. And that's not saying that you have to meet a bunch of people on solo trips. I had really, really amazing times sitting in cafes for hours on end, just writing by myself. And that's a really beautiful part of it too. And I think one of the reasons that it's so wonderful is you can choose, like you can decide you're going to meet people and decide to go out with them, or you can decide to have a day by yourself. You can decide to pick up and leave and go to a different country if you want. It's the freedom of not being locked into anything that I think is really invaluable.
It is, and it's so true, and that's something that I really value as well about solo travel and, just kind of moving around. But also too, this trip was so different for you in that you are such, or you were such an organized person that you love to schedule everything,
Yeah.
you love to plan everything. But because this was so last minute, all the plans just kind of went away, and then you just had to kind of pick up as you went. Like,
Yeah, and it was, you're so right. My friends at home make fun of me because I will plan a weekend 2 weeks out. And don't get me wrong, it's amazing and we all have a wonderful time, but everybody's always like, God, you plan so far ahead. It's like I'm not even like thinking about 2 days from now. And so this was so outside my comfort zone and like my genetic makeup. And I really went for it. I knew that I was going to start the trip in London, because that's where our original tickets were booked. We were supposed to fly into London and then connect on to Rome. So we flew to London. He went on to Rome, and I stayed in London. I luckily had a friend from high school that lived there, so I stayed with her. But I didn't book any of my next destinations until I was in the next country. So I had no idea where I was going to end up or where I was going to go. And I really did zero research. The extent of my research was, okay, I decided I'm going to Barcelona. Let's look on Hostel World and pick a hostel based on the reviews. But other than that, it was really kind of flying by the seat of my pants. But I think that's what made the trip so magical for me, is that I didn't really know what was coming next or where I was going.
yeah, like the fact that, like you said, you didn't know, but then also because it was just so like out of the box for you to just not be planning every second of every day. But what I also really appreciated about like your story was that, you said you started off in London where a friend of yours was, and you had a few days to kind of, I feel like, adjust this transition of like being in this place where you know so well in LA, because I feel like after London, you started to open up more and more with like meeting more people that you don't know and inviting people you just met on a night out. You became more and more spontaneous, I felt like, as like, the story went on.
Yeah, totally. And I think that happened. It was very like universally divine how that happened. I started the trip with my friend who I knew, and it was this like comfort from home. And I was still on the first 2 days in London, she was working. So I was going out and had, these big adventure days on my own. But I knew that I was coming home to a friend, and I had that kind of safety net the first couple days of my trip. And then after that, when I went to Amsterdam, my friend had set me up with a woman that lived there who kind of hosts travelers like Airbnb style. So it was someone I didn't know, but it still felt a little like there was a little bit of comfort there once I got to know her, and it wasn't too outside of my comfort zone. And then when I got to Paris after that, that was my first hostel experience. So, and I didn't plan any of that. It kind of just fell into my life that way. And so I think it was really interesting looking back on it. It really kind of, it was like a bird coming out of the nest, like one step at a time. It was very, perfect how it unfolded.
No, I love that analogy of like the bird. It's like, the egg had hatched, and then you were finally ready to leave the nest and really fly, on your own.
Totally.
I know, I love that. But no, it's true. And then also too, what I was just kind of thinking was like where you started off was, like London in the UK, where I feel like is most similar to the US. And I felt
Yeah.
like each place that you were going to was a place that was becoming more and more different from compared to the US. And it just really kind of showed how you were really evolving. Like, wow, she's really stepping out of her comfort zone, and not just terms of like what she's doing, but like where she's going.
That's so true. I never even really put that together. That's totally accurate.
Yeah, I was just like, oh wow. But you talk so much about like personal experiences happening along your trip, but like in terms of experiencing like these other cultures, what were some of like the biggest takeaways that you were getting from each place that you were visiting culture wise?
I think I had a really good mix of being immersed in different cultures. I was actually talking to someone the other day and was like, God, I'm really glad I ended up doing the trip that I did versus what Javier and I had planned, because we were supposed to just do Italy and do different parts in Italy. And the way that I went, I got so many different cultures and so many different sites, and it was really, a wide blanket of what I ended up being able to see. Um, Amsterdam, for me, Dutch people are some of the nicest people I've ever experienced. Even, the woman I stayed with, but even just the people that you meet at, on the street and at stores are just so kind hearted. You can just really like get a great essence from them. I totally fell in love with Barcelona. I've always had a pull to Latin culture and Latin music. I love to salsa dance. I obviously date Latin men, and it really is just a beautiful place, and the culture feels like it just emanates through the streets, and it was a place that my heart felt really at home in. And the food, honestly, like the best part for me of all the different places and like all the different cultures was getting to like eat how they eat. And it, even in Mykonos, like it was really awesome to see the different cuisines in each of them and the way that people live. It's a whole new experience, and you feel so sheltered when you finally break out and start getting out to see different places. It's like mind blowing when you've not traveled that much.
I'm like you. I'm such a foodie as well. I love exploring the food. I feel like that's definitely the best part. And I also want to say, so when I was reading the part where you were in Barcelona, I used to live there, and
Oh my
and
god.
all the places that you mentioned, like brunch and cake and like razzmatazz and OBM, I was like, oh my god, she's been to all these places. It just made me miss it so much. And you talk about them so well that I was just like, oh, I'm tearing up. you know,
Oh my god, that's amazing. What an experience that must have been.
Yeah, it's just like you. When you talked about the energy that Barcelona has, I knew exactly what you were talking about. I'm like, yes, there's this energy, there's this pull the city has. So, yeah, like the food, like you said, is absolutely amazing. But you said, you traveled a bit for like work. So how, even though you were like traveling from work, I'm assuming then I guess you didn't really have time to kind of explore those places when you're like on set.
I mean, look, I wouldn't say that I'm not well traveled. My parents, my mom has been in the industry my whole life, so that meant I got to go to a lot of amazing places when I was younger. I traveled to New Zealand and South Africa, but I was younger, so it's definitely a different experience when you go as a child versus when you go as an adult. You can really break out and take everything in. And as an adult, I've gone to places and traveled quite a bit as well, but it was always with people. And I had never done Europe. I had been to Bulgaria once to do a film, um, and had like one day to kind of walk around and explore, but I had never done Europe. So this was like totally new to me, and it was wild to be able to experience it on a level where you just really got to walk and explore and eat and see everything as an adult. It was a totally different experience than traveling, inside the US, and like going to Hawaii and stuff, like where you go on vacation, like there's a difference between vacation and travel to me. And this was travel for sure.
Yeah, because like you said, like, you're actively exploring places every day. You're not just like relaxing, which I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but you're actively trying to just kind of see more of like your surroundings. And especially like being solo, you get to do it completely on your own terms. You said like if you want to go, eat somewhere at a particular place, you can, or if you want to like relax, you can. You don't have to answer to anyone.
Yeah, and it's more of an adventure. It's more of, God, where am I going to go today? What am I going to do today? Where should I go next? It's definitely more of an adventure than what I would classify as a vacation.
Oh, yes, definitely. And that's why I think what makes it more exciting is because it is a real adventure that because not everything is planned, you just never know what's going to come your way. Most of it, is pretty good. But then, of course, there's, some things that sometimes don't always go very well. So,
Totally.
so when you were doing your solo trip, like in Europe, I know you were going through a lot of personal things with your relationship, but what were some other difficult things that you were going through traveling, like as, a solo female around Europe?
So the first thing that comes to mind is when I was in Paris. Paris was admittedly my least favorite. Not to say I didn't like it. I would probably totally go back in the future. But it wasn't my favorite out of all the places I went. And the first night I was there, I found my hostel. That was the first hostel that I stayed at on my trip. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go out and, have dinner at a cafe somewhere and read and write. And I bumped into this guy who was very non-threatening and like kind of shorter and skinny. And we started talking and he offered to kind of show me around. That quickly turned into him trying to become more than friends with me and being very weird and walking me to the drug dealing part of Paris. And I immediately was like, oh, okay, this is what people talk about. This is how people die on travel trips. Luckily I was able to maneuver myself out of the situation and get back to my hostel and away from him. But definitely Paris in general felt a little less safe to me than any other place. Not that I felt like I couldn't go out by myself, but after that, when I came back to my hostel, I was holding my phone in my pocket and I felt someone's hand slip in. Luckily, I was grabbing my phone, but I was like, oh my God, that's someone just tried to pickpocket me. And so I think those things made Paris feel a little less safe than the other places I was at. But other than that, nothing went insanely wrong, apart from the drama I was having with, the guy in my life. But travel wise, it was a pretty effortless trip. I learned how to, take all the public transportations in each different city. And luckily, Ubers are mostly everywhere around the world. They didn't have them in Barcelona yet. We did taxis there. But yeah, I mean, there was nothing that was crazy difficult that wasn't personal other than the Paris mishap, I think.
Yeah, like I feel like now it is becoming a lot easier to travel, like you said, because Uber or apps like Uber are, exist almost everywhere. And then, yeah, like public transportation, especially in Europe, I find like they are pretty easy to figure out and navigate. But it is interesting how in different countries, like you said, there might be experiences with men. I feel like every woman has their story of a very awkward or uncomfortable situation with a guy. And it's not like to generalize any country or any like type of guy. It's just like it just kind of happens, I guess, at some point when you are alone, which is unfortunate, but I feel like it's something that happens.
Yeah, totally. And to be fair, I, walked right into that situation. I could have just been like, no, I'm okay. I'm going to go to dinner by myself. But, it's part of the adventure when you're traveling is you're meeting different people and going different places. And as long as you're being conscious and responsible and safe, I didn't personally ever feel like I was in danger or couldn't handle something when I was on my trip. And mind you, when I was on the plane, I was like, well, the only thing I know about hostels is that there was a movie where people get brutally murdered. What do you mean I'm supposed to stay in hostel?
Oh, God.
Um,
Oh,
it was like
gosh.
it was like a whole new world for me. And obviously now I know that hostels are amazing and that's where you meet all the people on your travels and they're like adult summer camps. But
Mhm.
so it was a whole new learning curve for me for sure. And that's the question I get asked a lot that's travel based is, did you feel safe and how did you feel, okay as a woman walking around in all these places? And I never once, other than that Paris incident, felt unsafe.
And that's good. And like you said, it's because it's generally just making sure that you're just aware of your surroundings and really just trusting your gut in various situations. I feel like that will just kind of help you to avoid those kind of, uncomfortable situations.
Yeah, and I feel like that's how it is anywhere. You have to be like that in the US too, and in your hometown. Like, you have to be self-aware and, not go to the shady parts of the town at night. It's just common sense.
And it's funny that you brought up the movie with the hostel, but did anyone ever bring up to you the movie Taken when you were traveling?
So many times. And it's, I mean, that's why there are movies and books. Stuff does happen like that. There's obviously like horror stories that are real of women being taken, and that's terrifying. But I try to live my life in a knowing that I'm always protected and taken care of, and it has done me well so far. So
Yeah, no, good. I asked because a lot of people brought that up to me, and I just thought, like you, I'm just going to be smart about it and just kind of live my life well intentioned and yeah, having fun but still being smart at the same time. So I completely understand. But so, you did this solo trip. And I guess, what I really kind of want to ask is like, what was like your biggest takeaway from this trip? You did 1 month, you went to like all these different countries on your own and especially trying to get past this heartache that you were going through. But what was the biggest lesson you learned from doing this trip on your own?
So the biggest lesson I learned when I set out on this trip, I knew that I was going to face this fear of abandonment and fear of not being okay by myself. And by the end of the trip, I had come to the realization that I'm never really abandoned because I will never abandon myself. And that was such a powerful thing for me to realize, because it now gave me this freedom to be single for as long as I wanted, to travel alone as long as I wanted, to know that as long as I was taking care of me, that I was never really alone. And even more so, it showed up in such a physical way. Like, on this trip for me, I had friends in every place I went to. I met amazing people in every country I was in, and people that like really cared about me and like championed for me and supported me, that I'm still friends with till this day. So it was really the universe showing me like, you're never really alone physically, ever, if you don't want to be, but you're also never spiritually alone on a cosmic level, because you're never going to abandon yourself. So I'd say that was like the biggest takeaway that I had.
And that's so important, like for everyone to know that like as long as you don't abandon yourself, that you would never be alone. And like another thing you mentioned too as well is that you were really like learning to love yourself through this process. And I feel like because you had all this time, to yourself, because yes, you were meeting friends and, hanging out with other people, but you also had a lot of time to yourself, whether it was to write or reflect. And I feel like in that time that really allowed you to reflect on yourself and realize what you want as a person and what you deserve and really realizing just how amazing you are and that yeah, why wouldn't I love myself?
Yeah, totally. And for me, loving yourself has always been this enigma. I knew that I needed to go learn that. Everybody always preaches you have to love yourself before you love anybody else, and loving yourself is the most important thing. And I was sitting there going, okay, I'm ready to do that. Can someone explain how? And nobody has this answer that they can give you to give you directions on how to love yourself. And so I really knew that that was something that I was searching for on this trip. I can't say that I learned it on my trip, which is why my big answer to that is written as the epilogue. But once I did come home and kept doing the work on myself and I did figure it out, it really did change my life. I always thought that loving yourself meant looking in the mirror and being like, I love you, Gabrielle. You're so amazing. And every time I did that, I felt psychotic. And it wasn't doing anything for my actual spirit and making me feel any better. So when I figured out how to really quote love myself, it really changed my life. And that to me is one of the biggest gifts I give people in the book is a step by step of like how you can do that, and how I did it and how it really helped me.
No, and I that's a beautiful gift to be able to share with others because in this time, especially too when we've had these last several months to kind of, be confined, to our homes, I feel like it's important to learn more about ourselves and like you said, to love ourselves. And I know it's not something you can simply do overnight, that sometimes it does take a bit of time, but it's something that you do need to be able to accomplish in order to be able to just kind of move forward with really anything in life. And also, I just think in the book, it just kind of goes to show that even though you're traveling all over the world, it goes to show that your problems are still going to follow you no matter where you are.
Completely. That's so accurate.
Yeah, I was like, I was reading, I like, because I've experienced that too, where like I had to leave someone behind in another country and we broke up, and I was like heartbroken, and like you are having all these thoughts and feelings about that person, and it doesn't matter if that you're halfway across the world, it's like those feelings are still there, and so it distance is not going to do anything. So it goes to show you really have to do the work in order to just enjoy where you're at.
Totally. And I had a really big fear of that whole trip, that was like, oh my God, what if I come home from this and I'm not fixed and I'm still heartbroken and I'm not okay? And those fears were then realized when I came home and I was not fixed and not healed and not okay. That's not to say that that trip didn't change my life. It taught me so much about myself, and it was the beginning of my really big healing journey. And without it, I don't know if it would have happened or how long it would have taken. And a lot of people, not a lot of people, I've also heard readers be like, "Oh, I wish she would have, just cut Javier off and not, been so focused on that the whole time." But it's like, well, I could have gone on a trip by myself and not spoken to him for a month, but then I would have had all those unresolved feelings still with me when I came back, and where would that wouldn't have served me either. So it's really like you're exactly right. It's no matter where you put yourself physically, like if you're not doing the work on the inside, it's not going to help you grow in the long run.
Mhm. Because yeah, like reading it, I was thinking like, yes, she should try to move on, but also I totally understand that you need to do that work and go through the process of healing, because healing, like as I said, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, and sometimes you need to talk with that person in order to gain like a better understanding as to kind of what happened, so you can put the pieces together yourself. So honestly, I felt like you did exactly what you needed to do in order for you to get where you are now. So after this trip happened, and like you said, you were still working on yourself, how do you think this really helped you on a personal level, but then also on a professional level because you did this trip?
Well, okay, so this takes me back to the everything happens for a reason. I'm so thankful and grateful to my ex-husband and to Javier, because without both of them and exactly how everything happened, I wouldn't have gone on this trip. I wouldn't have learned all this stuff about myself. I wouldn't have written this book that is now being read by women around the world and helping to heal other people. It's so rewarding to know that all the stuff that I went through has now created this art form that's reaching people and helping them. So it's completely changed my career path for one. I mean, I'm still acting and directing, but this has very much become a big part of my life and brought me a lot of joy. Um, but also writing this book, and I wrote three-fourths of it on my Europe trip, and I finished it when I came home. Writing this book is what got me through 2017. It was beyond what any therapy could have done. It was beyond what years of healing could have done. It really was like there was something locked inside of me that needed to come out, and writing it was my way of healing. And it really, truly did that for me. So I'm so thankful to the whole experience, and it happened kind of exactly how it was meant to, I think.
I completely agree, just because, like you said, everything does happen for a reason. And had those men not done what they had done, you wouldn't be, where you are now. You wouldn't have had this book, and you wouldn't have had this kind of a shift in careers. Like you said, you're acting and directing, but just doing more so with your career because you have the platform that you do. So now, like you said, you did that solo trip and you went on another solo trip. I listened on an interview that you actually went to Thailand, and I think you also went to Bali.
Yeah, so I went to Southeast Asia. I was supposed to only do Vietnam and Bali, 2 weeks in Vietnam and 2 weeks in Bali. And about a week into Vietnam, I was like, God, my heart's just like not settling the right way. Like, I don't feel like I need to be feeling right now. And because I was solo and didn't have ties to anybody, I bought a ticket to Thailand and ended up going to Thailand for a week and a half before Bali. And it honestly was the best part of the entire trip. If I hadn't had a silent retreat booked in Bali already, I probably would have stayed in Thailand longer. And I didn't even do like the islands and like the beautiful, amazing parts of Thailand. I went to a little town called Pai, and it was such a magical place. I met the most incredible people. One girl I met who actually knew who I was because she had read the book. And we became really good friends. We still talk like every week. And it just had some incredible experiences there. And it was definitely the highlight of the trip, which wasn't even originally planned.
It's funny how that works. It's the things that are unplanned just somehow tend to be some of the best plans ever. But what inspired you to go to Southeast Asia this time? I mean, you tackled Europe, unexpectedly. I mean, what drew you to go to Southeast Asia this time?
I mean, God, there's so many places I want to go, and there's places that I have been that I want to go back to. So it feels like there's just never going to be enough time to do all of it. But I've always had a pull to want to travel Asia. It's first of all, it's so cheap that you can literally go for a month, and it would cost you less than a normal vacation for a week would. And it's just a really incredibly beautiful part of our world. And I've only seen obviously three different parts of it, and not even nearly, I went to a couple places in Vietnam, but there's so much of Vietnam that I didn't see, and Thailand and Bali. But I just love the spiritual Zen aspect that kind of emanates from a lot of the Asian places. And it was a really wonderful experience for me to get to choose to go by myself. And I think Europe made me really fall in love with solo travel. So I didn't want to go back to Europe. I want to go back to Europe and do a ton of it. But for my first solo trip after the Europe fiasco, I wanted to choose somewhere that I knew I was going to feel safe, and that I could have my money stretch out a little more, and that I just have always been called to go to. I've always wanted to see Bali and Thailand. That's always been high on my list. And I'm definitely planning on going back and doing just a month in Thailand because it was so amazing.
Oh, I agree. I didn't make it to Pi, but I've heard amazing things about Pi, and that it's, kind of very
Yeah.
spiritual, and there's just like a lot of international people there as well. And so yeah, I'm kicking myself that I didn't make it there. But
Yeah, if you ever go back, definitely go for at least a week. I can't tell you how many people I met there that were like, "Yeah, we came for a couple days, and it's been 3 weeks, and we just don't want to leave." But it's a really incredible place. But I definitely want to go and travel more throughout Thailand.
it's kind of funny how in Southeast Asia, like you said, because I've also met a lot of people who say they're going to stay X amount of time in a place, and they end up staying for weeks, months, or years, based on what they're doing. And it's just kind of funny, but I see why. I mean, like you said, it's so cheap. It's such a more relaxed like way of life compared to like Western countries, like the UK or US. So I can see definitely the draw, but it is just kind of funny how so many people end up doing that. And I listened on an interview you did, and you said that you would actually be willing to move to Pi if you could.
I did. I said if I ever like gave up acting and directing and decided I was just gonna write, I could totally live there. I feel that way about Barcelona too, honestly. But yeah, I mean, Pi was like you have your like one long street of a night market, and then there's just endless cafes that are like you feel like you're walking into the secret garden, and it's just absolutely amazing, and the food is so good, and it's really beautiful, and it's surrounded by these incredible mountains, and it's just a really you feel like the spirit there. It's just a really beautiful place. So yeah, if I ever moved for a little while, I could definitely see myself there.
Do you think you would? But like even if it was for like a month or so, I mean, you said you would go to Thailand for a month, but would you maybe try to extend maybe more of that time in Pi?
I mean, I definitely want to go back to Pi, and I want to do the islands and really like see more of it. I'll probably go back to Pi for 4 or 5 days when I do that trip. But yeah, I mean, if I ever was like, okay, I'm gonna hunker down and like write another book, I could totally see myself moving there for a couple months. I do have it in my soul that I want to live abroad for like a year at some point in my life to say that I did that and to get those experiences. But I don't know if I would do it there. God, I don't know. Like Italy always calls to me. So I don't know. I would have to really think on where I was, what I was going for, and what I was trying to get out of it, and then decide on a place from there.
No, I totally get that. Like because globalization is such a big thing and we do have that kind of freedom to go anywhere, it kind of makes it, I guess we're like privileged in a sense that we have that we do have that choice as to being like where can we go in the world. And I think that just that's why I just appreciate this time so much. I mean, maybe not right now because of what's going on, but in general, but like in general, I think it's so beautiful that we can do that, and not just people from the US, but people all over the world living that kind of life. But if you live abroad, I mean, I'm planning on moving abroad again soon, so you never know if we might bump into each other. I feel like this world is so small.
Do you know where you're going to move yet?
So I was actually supposed to be back in Barcelona this summer, but hence what's going on, that's not going to happen. And then I've been thinking, I also lived in Bali for a while and I was thinking of going back there for a bit. But also Bali, I've heard that they're not going to allow international travelers come in possibly until not till like 2021.
Oh wow.
So things change obviously daily, weekly. So it's just kind of like a waiting game, but I'm not rushing it. I feel like you, like if the opportunity presents itself or when it does, great. But for the time being, it is good to be back in the States since my friends and family are here. So, and I'm sure for you, it's good with everything that's going on. Like it's now more important than ever to be close with those like close to you.
Yeah, it's definitely a wild time right now that's making me really reflect, but I can't say that I'm not like dying to get out of LA.
Oh no, trust me, me too. This is definitely the longest I've stayed in one place. So I'm just
Right.
like, so I'm like, oh, this is different. But so for you, I know you're like you said, you do so much. You're not just an author, you're an actor, director. So I know you have a lot of projects coming up, the next several months. So what are you hoping for yourself to accomplish later on this year?
Oh God. Well, normally that question would be really different than what it is now because of all the COVID stuff that's going on. It's really wild. The whole, you know, entertainment industry has kind of been put on pause until we figure out what's going on more. Some productions are starting to slowly ramp back up, but it's nowhere near what it used to be. I shot two films at the beginning of this year, one in January and one in February. I know one of those will be out later this year, but it's kind of we're in like this weird waiting game. So I've been really thankful that I have the book and that that's all done online, and I've been able to kind of connect with my readers on a different level and do some fun stuff in that sense. We are in the very very early stages of pitching the book as a TV show, so we'll see how that pans out. But very early stages. So I would love to see that happen one day. I think that would be a dream of mine to see this story up on the screen. But other than that, it's kind of like we're waiting like the rest of the world to see what the heck is gonna transpire in the next couple months.
Yeah, it's definitely a waiting game, but I mean, the fact that your book could possibly be a show, that would I would definitely watch it. I love anything that kind of relates to, like to travel and also too because how you portray yourself in the book is someone who's just very strong and very spiritual. And what I also loved too is how you really would dive in deep into your thoughts and how you have the thought onion and you would go with your superficial thought and then you would kind of break it down another layer and figure out like where are these thoughts really coming from, like what is it stemming from. And I think that is just like really powerful, so to be able to kind of have someone like that be on a screen would be, I think, I don't know, I just feel like it's something that the world kind of needs, like a strong female character who really thinks before she acts and who is just really open-minded. So I would really love to see that. So I'm hoping that does happen.
Yeah, I mean, it would be awesome on a personal level, but like, it would also be great to be able to go travel to all those places again.
No, oh no, oh trust me, I'm on the same boat as you. But if anything, though, I feel like you've accomplished so much. Not just like personally, but also professionally. But as a woman who is a solo traveler, I mean, what advice would you give someone who wanted to do this for themselves if they wanted to go solo travel and really just really take a risk like that? Like, what is one bit of advice would you give?
Just do it, and don't plan too much. Don't make some crazy long itinerary. Just book the ticket, decide where your first location is, and book your first hostel, and just go for it. And people always say, oh, would what about Airbnbs? The way that I met so many amazing people was because I stayed in hostels. I personally have never had a bad experience there. I know they do exist, but it's really the way to go if you're going solo, I think. And to just really keep your heart open and don't be afraid to put yourself out there and meet people. It's wild what you'll realize about yourself and what you'll accomplish when you're pushed out of your comfort zone. And it'll be the best thing you ever do. So to just book it and do it.
I would say cheers to that. It's definitely like the best life decision anyone could do. But also what you were saying on the hostel, if anyone doesn't like sharing rooms, there are like private rooms. Did you ever do that? Did you ever get a private room in the hostel or did you always just do like the shared rooms?
I traveled with a girl a little bit in Asia who I met, and she was all about the private rooms and hostels. I started with the all, but oh, you know what? I didn't actually. My first hostel was in Paris, and it was a mixed dorm. It wasn't all female. I did do an all female one in Vietnam when I got there, but yeah, I mean, they have the private room options, but you still get that community feeling of everyone hanging in the common area and stuff, and it's just a great place to meet people. And they do tours and adventures, and Hostel World, which is the app, is literally like Airbnb. You can read all the reviews, all the different ratings, and see pictures, so you like really know what you're walking into before you even get there.
Yes, like I said, like right now it's just so much easier to travel, like you said, with apps like Hostel World, Airbnb for those that want to do it. But there's just so many like options at this point that you can really kind of find anything that kind of caters to your needs, which is amazing. But thank you so, so much for your time and like sharing us your story. But yes, people, like you need to check out her book, Eat, Pray, FML. It is such a good read. I literally read it within like, I don't know, 3, 4 days. It's an easy read and it's just so good. And there's just, I don't know, there was just so many like kind of cliffhangers, like, where the paragraph ends and then it just kind of, I don't know, ends with a sentence that just kind of draws you in. You need to read more. So it was really good. So yeah, you can find it on Amazon, obviously every bookstore. And also if people want to follow you, where can people find you?
So I'm on Instagram mostly, but on Facebook and Twitter as well at Gabrielle Stone, and the book is at Eat Pray FML.
Perfect. Yes, I will also have that in the show notes so people can check it out. But thank you again so much, Gabrielle. This was truly amazing. And I'm definitely curious to see what happens next for you.
You're so welcome. And thank you for having me on. And hopefully our travel paths cross one day.
I would definitely love that. You never know. So once we can all travel again.
Fingers crossed.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
For more information on travel and life abroad, go to Venture-Ette.com. If you enjoyed this episode, let me know by leaving a review. And be sure to follow me at Venture-Ette on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Safe travels, and until next time.